In 1933, the average American family spent nearly a third of every dollar on food, and not one scrap of it went to waste. Your great-grandparents didn't have credit cards, Amazon Prime, or a hardware store on every corner. What they had was skill. Number 14 on this list could save you $400 a year, and you can start tonight with things already sitting in your kitchen. And number 2, whole industries were built on making you forget it ever existed. These 20 skills kept families fed, clothed, and warm through the hardest decade in American history, and most of us couldn't do a single one of them today. Before we start, hit that subscribe button, because once you see how simple these are, you'll never look at your grocery bill the same way again. Let's count down the 20 self-reliance skills our grandparents used to save a fortune. Number 20, darning socks and mending clothes. Before the throwaway closet, a hole in a sock was not a reason to buy new socks. It was a 5-minute job done by lamplight after supper. Your great-grandmother kept a darning egg, a smooth wooden bulb she slipped inside the heel to stretch the fabric tight, then wove new thread across the gap like a tiny loom until the hole simply vanished. A torn shirt elbow got a patch. A frayed collar was turned and re-stitched so the worn edge hid on the underside. A spool of thread cost a nickel and outlasted 100 repairs. Families that mended bought maybe one new pair of work socks a year instead of a dozen. The skill traveled in every sewing basket in America, taught mother to daughter at the kitchen table. Then, cheap imported clothing made replacing easier than fixing, and the darning egg went into a drawer. Today, the average household throws away around 80 pounds of textiles a year. Your great-grandmother would have been horrified. Number 19, cutting hair at home. A trip to the barber cost real money, and with 4 or 5 children, that added up fast. So the kitchen became the barber shop. Out came the hand clippers, the comb, and a chair set in the middle of the linoleum. A dish towel pinned around the neck. Fathers learned to fade the back of a boy's head. Mothers trimmed bangs against a steady thumb. The buzz of those manual clippers and the snip of scissors was a Sunday evening sound in millions of homes. A decent pair of clippers cost a couple of dollars once and lasted 20 years. A family that cut its own hair saved what amounted to weeks of groceries every single year. The skill faded as wages rose and the corner salon became routine until a haircut you could have done in 15 minutes at home started costing $30 a head. During recent hard times, plenty of families dusted off the clippers again and remembered their grandparents knew something. Number 18, resoling and repairing shoes. A good pair of leather shoes was an investment, not a disposable item, and you protected that investment for years. When the soles wore thin, you did not buy new shoes. You took them to the cobbler, or if money was tight, you fixed them yourself with a shoe repair kit sold right out of the Sears catalog. Men hammered new rubber heels on at the kitchen workbench, glued and tacked fresh soles, and rubbed neat's foot oil into the leather to keep it from cracking. A child's school shoes were handed down, resoled between each kid. A resole cost a fraction of new shoes and could be done 4 or 5 times on one quality pair. The smell of leather and shoe polish meant the weekend chores were underway. Cheap molded footwear that could not be repaired killed the trade, and the neighborhood cobbler nearly disappeared. Now we toss shoes the moment the sole splits, never knowing a good pair was built to last a decade. Number 17, making soap from scratch. Every farm wife knew how to turn waste into something you'd otherwise have to buy. Soap was made from 2 things most families already had: rendered fat saved from cooking and lye leached from wood ashes, or bought cheap by the can. She'd cook the fat and lye together in a big kettle in the yard, stir it for what felt like forever, then pour the thick mixture into wooden molds lined with cloth. Days later, it cured into hard bars cut with a knife and stacked to age. That soap washed dishes, scrubbed floors, did the laundry, and cleaned the children, all from kitchen scraps and ashes. A year's worth of soap cost almost nothing. The technique was passed down at quilting bees and church socials, written in pencil in the backs of recipe books. Mass-produced bars and detergents made store-bought easier, and the kettle in the yard went cold. Yet the whole craft ran on the simple refusal to throw away a single, useful thing. Number 16. Sharpening their own knives and tools. A dull blade was a sign of a careless household, and nobody paid a stranger to fix what they could fix themselves. Every kitchen had a whetstone, and every man kept a file and an oil stone in the shed. Grandpa would spit on the stone, draw the blade across at a steady angle, and test the edge against his thumbnail. Axes, hoes, scythes, scissors, even the lawnmower blade, all stayed razor sharp at home. A sharp knife made cheaper cuts of meat go further and made every job faster and safer. A good whetstone cost $1 and lasted a lifetime. The rhythmic scrape of steel on stone was as common as birdsong on a Saturday morning. Then knives got cheap enough to replace, and the skill quietly slipped away. Now people throw out perfectly good blades or pay to have them sharpened, never realizing 5 minutes with a stone restores an edge better than new. Your grandfather would tell you a sharp tool is a saved dollar. Number 15. Saving every drop of bacon grease. On the back of every stove in America sat a tin can or a ceramic crock, and into it went the fat from every pan of bacon, every sausage, every fried chicken. Nothing was poured down the drain. That golden grease was strained through a cloth and saved for cooking everything else. It fried the eggs, popped the corn, greased the cornbread pan, and seasoned the cast iron skillet until it shone black and slick. A pound of bacon fed the family twice, once as bacon and again as the fat that flavored a week of meals. Buying lard or oil separately would have been an expense, so the grease can erase it. During the war, families even turned in excess fat to butchers because the glycerin was needed for the troops. Then nutritionists declared all fat the enemy, and we poured our flavor and our savings straight into the trash. Cooks today are quietly bringing the grease can back, and their food tastes the better for it. Number 14. Drying laundry on the line. This is the one that could save you $400 a year, and it costs nothing to start. There were no electric dryers humming in the basement. There was a clothesline strung across the yard and a bag of wooden pins on the porch. Monday was wash day, and by mid-morning the line snapped with sheets billowing in the wind, shirts pinned shoulder to shoulder, towels stiffening in the sun. Sunlight bleached out stains and killed odors for free, and clothes dried in the open air smelled like nothing you can buy in a bottle. In winter, laundry froze stiff on the line, then finished drying by the stove. The dryer is one of the most expensive appliances in your home to run, and your great-grandmother never owned one. She knew the sun and the wind would do the work without sending a nickel to the power company. The clothesline is making a comeback, and every load you hang is money back in your pocket. Number 13. Saving and reusing glass jars. Long before recycling was a slogan, every jar that entered the house was treated like treasure. A pickle jar washed clean became a storage container for beans, buttons, nails, or leftover gravy. Mason jars were the currency of the kitchen, used and reused for decades, sealed with new lids each canning season. Coffee cans held bacon grease, kitchen string, and pennies. A family that saved its glass never bought a single piece of food storage, never owned a cabinet full of mismatched plastic, and never threw out something that could hold something else. Pantry shelves lined with glass jars, each labeled in careful handwriting, were a portrait of a household that wasted nothing. The skill was simply paying attention, seeing the use in a thing before tossing it. Then disposable packaging made everything single-use, and we started buying the very containers our grandparents got for free with their groceries. The jar on the shelf was a quiet declaration that nothing in this house gets thrown away if it can still serve. Number 12. Mixing their own cleaning supplies. Walk down a cleaning aisle today and you'll see 50 bottles for 50 jobs. Your great-grandmother did all of it with 4 things: vinegar, baking soda, borax, and a bar of that homemade soap. Vinegar cut grease, shined windows, and softened laundry. Baking soda scoured the sink, freshened the icebox, and lifted stains. Borax boosted the wash and kept the ants out. A splash of ammonia handled the rest. She mixed what she needed in an old bottle, and the whole arsenal cost less than $1 a month. There were no specialty sprays, no scented multi-packs, no marketing telling her she needed a different product for every surface. The chemistry was simple, and it worked, which is exactly why companies spent fortunes convincing us we needed something stronger and newer. Today, a family can replace nearly every cleaning product in the house with a few pantry staples and save hundreds a year. The knowledge never stopped working. We just got talked out of using it. Number 11. Sewing clothes from flour and feed sacks. Here's a piece of American ingenuity so clever the companies had to play along. During the Depression, flour, sugar, and chicken feed came in cotton sacks, and farm wives started turning those sacks into dresses, shirts, aprons, and quilts. The manufacturers noticed, and soon they were printing the sacks in cheerful florals and patterns so women would choose their brand by the fabric. A mother could clothe her whole family from the bags her groceries came in. She would save sacks until she had enough matching prints, then cut and sew a dress on the treadle machine while the children slept. An entire wardrobe came essentially free, riding in on the staples she had to buy anyway. The skill required real talent with a needle, passed down at 4-H clubs and church sewing circles. When cheap, ready-made clothing flooded the stores, the feed sack dress became a memory. But for a generation, looking sharp cost nothing but thread and time. Number 10. Bartering and trading with neighbors. Cash was scarce, but skills and surplus were everywhere, so communities ran on trade. The man who could fix engines repaired the neighbor's truck in exchange for a side of beef. A woman with extra eggs traded them for her neighbor's garden tomatoes. The seamstress hemmed trousers in return for firewood. No money changed hands, no sales tax, no markup, just 2 people each giving what they had plenty of for what they lacked. A good barter network meant a family could get half of what it needed without spending a dime. The arrangement was sealed with a handshake on the porch and remembered without a single written contract. This was the original sharing economy, built on trust and proximity, and the simple understanding that everybody was good at something. As we grew richer and more isolated, we stopped knowing our neighbors well enough to trade with them, and we started paying strangers for everything. The skill wasn't really bartering, it was community, and that's the thing we miss most. Number 9. The root cellar. Before refrigeration ruled the kitchen, families kept months of food fresh, using nothing but a hole in the ground. The root cellar, dug into a hillside or under the house, stayed cool and dark and steady year-round. Down there, potatoes, carrots, turnips, beets, apples, onions, and squash were kept for the entire winter, packed in sand or straw and checked weekly for any that had turned. A whole autumn harvest went down the cellar steps and fed the family until spring without a single trip to the store. The earthy smell of cool soil and stored apples was the smell of security, of knowing you would eat no matter how hard the winter got. Building one cost only labor, and it ran on the temperature of the earth itself, free forever. As supermarkets put fresh produce on every shelf in every season, the root cellar was filled in and forgotten. Yet it let families buy or grow in bulk and store for pennies, a level of food security most of us have completely traded away. Number 8. Saving seeds, year to year. A packet of seeds today costs a few dollars, and we buy new ones every spring without a thought. Your great-grandparents never bought seeds twice. At harvest, they chose the best plants, the biggest tomatoes, the hardiest beans, the sweetest melons, and let those go to seed. They dried the seeds on screens in the shed, stored them in labeled envelopes and jars, and planted them the following year. Over generations, this turned ordinary garden plants into varieties perfectly suited to their own soil and climate, free and improving with every season. A single saved tomato could supply a family's plants for the rest of their lives. Seed-saving knowledge passed across fences and through letters, with prized family varieties handed down like heirlooms, which is exactly what we still call them. Then, seed companies developed hybrids that do not breed true, forcing gardeners to come back and buy every year. The skill our grandparents took for granted became a small act of independence, and the families who kept it never paid for a seed again. Number 7. Churning their own butter. For families with a cow, or even a neighbor who had one, butter was something you made, not something you bought. The cream was skimmed off the top of the milk, left to ripen, then poured into a churn and worked up and down, until the cream broke and golden butter formed. The children took turns at the dasher while someone watched the clock. The fresh butter was rinsed, salted, and pressed into molds, and the leftover buttermilk went straight into biscuits and pancakes, so nothing was lost. A family that churned ate butter all week for the price of keeping a cow, while the surplus could be sold or traded for other goods. The rhythmic slosh of the churn was the sound of a kitchen that produced instead of purchased. When dairies and refrigerated trucks made butter cheap and convenient, the home churn went silent. But that simple skill turned one animal into a steady supply of food, and even a little income, all from the cream that would otherwise sit there. Number 6. Hunting and fishing for the table. For most of America, this was not sport, it was supper. A man who could shoot a deer, trap a rabbit, or pull a string of catfish from the creek put meat on the table that cost nothing but a shell and an afternoon. One deer could feed a family for much of a winter. The meat was canned, smoked, or kept cold in the cellar, so not an ounce spoiled. Boys learned to fish before they learned long division, and the skill fed households when wages could not. A creel of bluegill, a brace of rabbits, a string of squirrels. This was protein that never appeared on a grocery bill. The know-how, cleaning, preserving, cooking the wild and tough cuts, low and slow, was handed down on quiet mornings in the woods and along the water. As the supermarket meat case made buying easier than hunting, fewer families bothered. Yet the people who kept the skill never went hungry and never paid butcher prices, because the woods and the water were the original free grocery store. Number 5. Baking bread and keeping a sourdough start. A loaf of bread was a few cents worth of flour, water, salt, and yeast, so almost nobody bought it. The kitchen filled with the smell of bread 2 or 3 times a week, the dough rising in a bowl by the warm stove, punched down, shaped, and baked into golden loaves that fed the family for days. Many homes kept a sourdough starter alive on the counter, a bubbling crock of fermented flour passed down for years, sometimes decades, that needed no store-bought yeast at all. A mother could feed her family bread, biscuits, rolls, and pancakes from a single sack of flour at a fraction of bakery prices. The skill lived in the hands, in knowing by feel when the dough was right, and it was taught at every kitchen counter in the country. When sliced bread in plastic bags made buying effortless, home baking became a hobby instead of a habit. But a loaf you bake costs a quarter of what you pay at the store and tastes like nothing on the shelf. Number 4. Raising Backyard chickens. A small flock of hens in the yard was one of the smartest investments a family could make. The chickens ate kitchen scraps, bugs, and weeds, costing almost nothing to keep, and in return they laid a steady supply of AGS and eventually meat for the pot. A dozen EGGS a day fed the family, went into the baking, and the surplus was sold or traded at the general store for the things the farm could not make. The hens turned garbage into breakfast, scraps into protein, and a small corner of dirt into a working food factory. Children gathered the warm eggs each morning, and the clucking in the yard was the sound of a household that fed itself. Zoning laws and supermarket cartons made keeping chickens seem quaint, and the backyard coop disappeared from most American homes. But egg prices have a way of reminding people, and across the country families are building coops again, rediscovering what their grandparents knew. A hen pays for herself many times over. Number 3. Home canning and preserving the harvest. This was the skill that carried a family through the lean months, and it turned a summer of plenty into a winter without want. When the garden came in all at once, nothing could be allowed to rot. So the kitchen turned into a factory of steam and glass. Tomatoes, green beans, corn, peaches, pickles, jams, and jellies were packed into mason jars, sealed and processed in boiling water or in a pressure canner until they would keep for a year on the shelf. By autumn, the pantry walls were lined, floor to ceiling, with hundreds of glowing jars, a portrait of security you could see. A single afternoon of canning replaced dozens of grocery runs. Families learned the craft from county extension agents and home demonstration clubs, and the rules were exact because a careless seal could spoil the food. As freezers and year-round produce made canning unnecessary, the pressure canner went to the attic. But putting food by meant a family ate its own garden in January and never paid winter prices for a vegetable. Number 2. Rendering lard and using the whole hog. Here is the skill entire industries spent millions teaching us to forget. When a family raised and butchered a hog, absolutely nothing was wasted. The fat was slowly rendered down into clean white lard, the finest cooking fat there is, which fried, baked, and made the flakiest pie crusts in America, all from what we now throw away. The meat was cured into hams and bacon, smoked in the smokehouse to keep without refrigeration. The trimmings became sausage, the bones made broth, and even the smallest scraps found a use. One hog could supply a family with cooking fat and meat for the better part of a year, bought once and stretched across months. The skill of curing and rendering was serious knowledge, passed down and done with care. Then we were told animal fat would kill us, and we replaced cheap natural lard with manufactured oils we now know were worse. A jar of rendered lard cost a family nothing and did the work of 3 products we buy separately today. Number 1. The family vegetable garden. And in first place, the skill that fed everything else on this list, the backyard garden. During the war, 20 million victory gardens grew nearly half of all the fresh vegetables eaten in America, planted in backyards, vacant lots, and window boxes by families who refused to depend on anyone else for their supper. A patch of dirt and a packet of saved seeds produced tomatoes, beans, squash, lettuce, peppers, and greens all season long. Food that cost only sweat and showed up fresh on the table the same day it was picked. The garden fed the family in summer, filled the canning jars for winter, and the surplus was shared down the street or sold at the market. The smell of turned earth, the first ripe tomato warm off the vine. The children sent out to pick supper. This was self-reliance you could taste. A well-tended garden saved a family hundreds of dollars a year and gave them something no store ever could, the certainty that they could feed themselves. As supermarkets made food effortless, the garden shrank to a strip of grass. But the people who kept digging never forgot that the most valuable thing in any yard isn't the lawn. It's the food you grow yourself. So here's my challenge. Pick just one this week. Hang a load of laundry on a line. Save your bacon grease. Plant 3 tomato seeds in a pot on the porch. Then come back and tell me in the comments which one you tried and whether your grandparents were just being old-fashioned, or whether they knew something we let ourselves forget, because these weren't just chores. They were freedom. Your grandparents knew. Now you do too.